Hi, and welcome back. I hope you enjoyed the video. My guess is there were a few items that were not necessarily clear to you. So as a debriefing exercise, I have also created a slide where you can see my answers to mapping each of the different icons and slogans into the 4 different quadrants. Now, some of the icons are very clear, but some are also borderline, so we might actually engage in some conversations, and if you want, take those conversations to our Slack channel for everyone that is participating in this Agile Leader online course. There are 4 elements that I actually want to highlight. Why? Because those 4 characteristics are super important when you think about the change that you want to run in an organization. Those 4 organizations are about how the individual cultures approach the topic of change. Let's start out with the slogan, transformational change. What type of culture would have that kind of characteristic? The transformational change is something that is very common in create cultures. Why? Because these organizations are constantly experimenting with new stuff, and suddenly they do a transformational change. Contrary to that, in the control culture, we have the preference to do incremental change. This does not mean that these organizations are good at incremental and iterative product development. It much rather lays out their preference towards changing. It's very common for organizations in the control culture to start out their organization's change initiative with some pilot projects. Probably you've seen this in your own organization. Once some of those pilot projects bear results, they move on to the next set of pilot projects. So one proof of concept after the other, they build trust that these kind of changes will ultimately benefit the organization, and then they become more courageous and change larger parts of the organizations a bit faster. Looking at compete cultures, we see that these organizations do value fast change. Of course, because they want to compete also with regards to how fast they can change compared to their competitors. A great example of this was Zalando in Germany. Zalando, having recruited a lot of people from companies like McKinsey, BCG, and Bain, also has some kind or very strong compete culture. When they decided to do their agile transformation in 2015, they didn't do a lot of pilot projects. They basically flipped the switch at once. I will talk more about that in a few moments. Finally, looking at the collaborate culture, those are the ones that take the longest to change. Why? Because they want to carry everyone with them. They value consensus over fast decisions taken by individuals. And that also means that changing these kind of organizations usually takes much, much longer. The important aspect here is that none of these preferences towards a certain type of change is either good or bad. They are just different. And the important thing here is that the type of change that you ultimately do in your organization needs to meet that organization's culture. The analogy that I use here is how different people have a different preference towards removing tape from their skin. There are the type of people that actually want to remove the tape super quickly. They just do one and it's gone. But it's very painful for a short period of time. On the other hand, you have people that remove the tape very slowly. It doesn't hurt that much, but it hurts over a longer period of time. None of this is good or bad. It's just different. And the same applies to organizations with their preference towards the different types of changing. If you have a control organization that actually wants to take things slowly, but you force them to change and flip the switch at once, you will face a ton of resistance from the different business units and individuals, and ultimately, most likely, that kind of change initiative will fail because the pain is too big for people to deal with. On the other hand, if you take a compete organization and force them to change slowly, most likely a large percentage of the organization, the ones that are not allowed to do the change right now, will be frustrated. And that will also not result in the change initiative being successful. So the competing values framework not only helps us to assess where our journey is starting and probably where we want to take this specific organization and its culture, it also gives us a good understanding what kind of change approach we should select or choose for this particular organization. I hope this video and the exercise gave you a good understanding of the different quadrants, which is the different cultures, and also displayed to you that understanding an organization's culture is very, very important when it comes to changing these organizations. In our next video, I will map the Agile Manifesto to the different cultures of the competing values framework. I'll see you in that video.